Hi, it's Katrina. The petroglyphs of the Enchanted Valley. In the South American country of Chile, there is a place called Valle del Encanto, or the Enchanted Valley. It's a strange place, one filled with ancient petroglyphs, prehistoric fossils, and signs of curious and wonderful things. The valley is little more than a ravine cutting across the desert, containing shrubs, rocks, and dirt. It was once a walking trail for the Chilean indigenous people as they moved from the huge and sprawling Andes Mountains to the coast. Today, it's most popular with hikers and tourists. It's also a great place to visit if you'd like to see some weird alien rock art that nobody seems able to explain. Scattered across rocks in the Enchanted Valley are unique examples of pre-Columbian rock art. Somebody, thousands of years ago, drew alien heads with antennae on the stones. Scientists don't know what these beings represent. They almost look like drawings of humans, except that they have antennae sticking out like some kind of highly advanced robot. And if that's not strange enough, there are the indents in the stones. Some of the rocks not only feature weird drawings of potentially extraterrestrial beings, but they also have random holes. Each deep hole punched into the rock is about the size of a fist, and nobody's ever been able to confirm why or how the natives created them. Some say they were used for grinding corn. Others have guessed for ceremonies, but it's not clear. The Tamil bell. In 1836, a missionary named William Colenso discovered a broken bronze bell that was at the time being used as a pot for boiling potatoes. He found the mysterious artifact, what would come to be known as the Tamil bell, near Whangarei in the northern region of New Zealand, being used by a Maori woman for cooking. What made the bell so strange and mysterious was that William identified an inscription running around its rim. The inscription was written in ancient Tamil and translates to Mohoyeden Buk's ship's bell. The script seems to suggest that the bell was already 500 years old when it was found, possibly from the Pandya dynasty of South India. This was a huge deal when it was discovered, because as far as Europeans were concerned, Australia and Polynesia, and indeed New Zealand, were all fairly new discoveries. The presence of a ship's bell from South India implies that seafarers from India discovered the lands of Oceania much earlier than Europeans. This posed yet another mystery. If the bell was really left behind by an Indian ship 500 years earlier, in the 12th or 13th century, why is there no mention of it anywhere? Tamil seafarers never wrote of any expeditions to unknown lands far to the south. It could have been a one-way trip. The ship may have reached New Zealand only to be stranded and the people killed. Others have speculated that the bell, although ancient, was not left in New Zealand 500 years ago. Instead, it may have been dropped by a more recent Portuguese vessel, or it could have washed up on shore as debris from an ancient shipwreck. Golden airplanes. The Quimbaya artifacts look like golden airplanes. These ancient artifacts were found in Colombia and were crafted by the indigenous Quimbaya people at least 500 years ago. There isn't much known about the Quimbaya civilization other than that they lived on the western slopes of the Andes Mountains, starting roughly in the 1st century BC. They were hunters, but slowly evolved to plant crops, then branched into mining and goldsmithing. The civilization reached its peak starting in the 4th century AD, then continued to prosper until the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. The Spanish were quick to put an end to 1,500 years of culture and tradition. The Quimbaya were known for one thing specifically: their mastery of gold work. They made spectacular jewelry, amazing statues, and other works of art out of gold and copper. The strange Quimbaya artifacts were looted in the 1800s from the central Cauca Valley, but archaeologists aren't sure from exactly where. They most likely came from 2 lost tombs pillaged by tomb raiders, but nobody knows for sure. To many, some of the gold artifacts look like airplanes. There are 123 tiny gold objects, each no larger than 3 inches, and each one totally unique. Some researchers say they were only meant to be depictions of lizards and butterflies and other flying creatures from the jungle, but some also look like modern flying machines. Some would argue the artifacts look more like flying machines than they do insects. There is no way the Quimbaya would have ever seen an airplane unless they had somehow witnessed a glimpse into the future or had extraterrestrial visitors cruising through the atmosphere. For this reason, the artifacts will remain a mystery. The Newark Holy Stones. David Wyrick allegedly discovered a set of artifacts in 1860 called the Newark Holy Stones. He found these stones within a cluster of ancient burial mounds in Ohio. And although the stones are highly controversial, and some don't believe they hold any historical value, they can still be found at the Humrick House Museum in Coshocton. The site where they were found definitely holds historical value, as it's one of the most important Native American Hopewell sites, occupied from between roughly 100 BC and 500 AD. The first of the stones is called the Keystone, and it was found inscribed with ancient Hebrew. The second stone is the Decalogue, a strange tablet that has the 10 Commandments from Exodus, also written in ancient Hebrew, and it also has the figure of Moses carved into it. The stones were taken for radiocarbon dating in 2014. Bradley Lepper from the Ohio History Connection dated one of the fragments as being from 85 AD, or just shy of 2,000 years old. That would fit nicely with the time that the Hopewell culture had been living where the artifacts were found. It would also help to confirm the lost tribes theory. The theory suggests an ancient tribe of Israelites crossed the sea and established a colony in Ohio thousands of years ago. On the flip side, experts have argued that David faked the artifacts because he was a steadfast supporter of the lost tribe theory. He wanted to make the theory a reality, and so he crafted the stones himself using materials that he stole from real archaeological sites. Texas Man Tracks. The Paluxy River in Texas is a fantastic site known primarily for its dinosaur footprints. There are dinosaur tracks all over the riverbed left over from the Cretaceous period. One of the most famous is a sequence of tracks known as the Chase. The tracks show a group of sauropods being chased by a hungry Acrocanthosaurus, a massive carnivore that lived in Texas 113 million years ago. The carnivore was just as dangerous and terrifying as the T-Rex. But the most controversial discovery to ever come out of the Paluxy River was made in the early 1930s. Locals came across dinosaur footprints right beside human footprints, making it seem as if some species of human was walking alongside dinosaurs in prehistoric times. The prints became known as the man tracks and were popularized in 1939 by conspiracy theorists. These conspiracy groups claimed giant human beings lived at the same time as dinosaurs. Many of the tracks have already been proven fake. It turned out some locals had gotten together during the Great Depression and carved the tracks themselves. They were just trying to make money and bring more commerce to the area. But other tracks have proven to be legitimate. These other man tracks are real fossilized tracks, only too distorted or eroded to tell for sure if they were made by giant people or bipedal dinosaurs. The Dorchester Pot. The Dorchester Pot was found in Dorchester, Massachusetts in 1852. The mystery behind the strange artifact is that it's supposedly 593 million years old. It was found broken into two pieces following an explosion used to break up rock near Meeting House Hill. A story in the Boston Transcript from June 5, 1852, describes the discovery of the artifact in great detail. The two pieces of the pot were found loose in the debris of the blast. It was inferred at the time that because of the location of the fragments, they had been stuck in solid stone. The pot fragments would have been buried under 10 feet of solid rock. The rock in which they were supposedly sealed accumulated between 570 and 593 million years ago at the bottom of what was once an ocean. It makes absolutely no sense that a small bell-shaped pot like a vase was stuck in such ancient rock. Some claim the pot is proof of creationism, while others say it's nothing but a Victorian-era candlestick. In all likelihood, it's possible that the candlestick got mixed up in the explosion somehow and perhaps wasn't physically stuck inside the rock at all. Still, it's an ongoing mystery that's never been fully confirmed as 500 million years old or not. Roman Mexico. In 1933, archaeologist José García Payón was excavating an ancient site in the Toluca Valley of Mexico. The site is about 40 miles from Mexico City, once the seat of a powerful Mesoamerican society. The major city of Calixtlahuaca, nothing more than a ruin today, was an urban settlement ruled by nomadic natives as far back as 640 BC. But over the next 2,000 years, the original inhabitants lost their influence. The city was taken over by the Mexica and later the Aztec, and by 1510, the whole place had been burned to the ground. It was during excavations of this city when José Payón discovered the terracotta head of something that looked strangely Roman. The head was part of a larger figure, but was found detached from its body in a grave buried under 3 floors of a pyramid. The head was accompanied with other valuable objects like jewelry made from copper and rock crystal. Whoever had been buried beneath the pyramid died around the year 1476. Where in the world the head came from is anybody's guess. The truly bizarre thing is just how much the terracotta head looks like a Roman artifact. It looks like it was pulled from the tomb of a Roman emperor and not from the grave of an unknown Aztec. An assessment done by Romeo H. Hristov from the University of New Mexico in 2001 said the hypothesis of Roman origin is applicable. Romeo went on in his report to claim the head could have come from the 2nd century AD. Judging by the shape of the beard and the style of hair, the head could have been one of the Severian emperors from between 193 and 235 AD. Still, that doesn't answer the question of how the head traveled across the world and made it into an Aztec grave in the middle of a Mexican valley. It's left researchers scratching their heads for decades, and no one has any tangible theories. Walking with Trilobites. In June 1968, William J. Meister was on an expedition 43 miles from Delta, Utah. He was with his wife and daughter, and their friends and 2 of their daughters. They were doing some amateur archaeology, looking for things like fossils and prehistoric ruins. They had already discovered a few trilobite fossils when suddenly William busted open a slab of rock and found a footprint. The rock cracked open like a book, revealing a set of obviously human tracks with the fossil of a trilobite in the middle. A trilobite is an extinct marine arthropod from the Paleozoic era. It was almost a perfect mold of someone wearing a sandal. What it looked like is that somebody had stepped on the trilobite, crushing it against their sandal and preserving it as an imprint. The strata in which these fossils were found is 500 million years old. That would suggest whoever walked here did so 500 million years before today. Nobody has ever been able to prove this, nor to really explain the artifact. In 1970, the footprint was used by Melvin A. Cook, a famous American chemist, as evidence against evolution. Most scientists have dismissed the track as nothing but nonsense. The trilobite fossil is certainly real, but the human print has mostly been dismissed as just a freak coincidence. The Dropa Stones. The Dropa Stones are a collection of 716 circular stone discs which allegedly date back 12,000 years. What makes them truly remarkable, besides being incredibly old, is that they have tiny markings on them that look like hieroglyphics. Each disc is about 1 foot in diameter, and each one has a pair of grooves. These grooves form spirals from the center of the disc to its outer edge. Nobody has any idea what the spirals could possibly mean, or what the Dropa Stones even are. The mysterious discovery took place in 1938 on the border of China and Tibet. A Chinese professor named Chi Pu Te came across a series of graves. The graves were bizarre because the skeletons only measured a maximum of about 4 feet tall and had peculiarly shaped heads. Nearby, the archaeologists found a cave system with strange rock art showing figures with unnaturally shaped heads. The rock was also engraved with representations of the sun, moon, and stars. Deeper inside the cave, the Dropa stones were found like a bunch of discarded pieces of machinery. These days, the Dropa Stones are mostly considered a hoax. Nothing about them has ever made it into official scientific records, meaning nothing about them has ever been explained. The prevailing yet highly controversial theory is that these stones tell the story of a group of people who crashed their spaceship and met the Dropa indigenous group. Then they lived with them up until they died. The strange men from space were incredibly short, and they were buried in the cave along with scraps of their crashed ship. The Dogo Figures. The Dogo figurines appear to be depictions of ancient astronauts, mysterious beings that came down from the sky thousands of years ago. The Dogo figurines are a collection of small statues that were made during the final years of the Japanese Jomon period, which lasted from between 14,000 to 400 BC. The strange figurines have unnatural characteristics that make them look as though they're wearing some kind of spacesuit. The body is bulky, just like a modern astronaut in their spacesuit. They also appear to have helmets on, kind of like the old diving helmets with the big circular window in the middle. The only difference is that there are two windows, looking like massive eyeballs that are far too large for the head itself. If they are supposed to be eyes, they are disproportionate in relation to the body. Some have interpreted the Dogo figures as representations of ancient gods. Experts at the Metropolitan Museum of Art suggest the bulky bodies of the statues represent pregnancy, and that the figures were associated with fertility and ancient rituals. But if this were true, it's strange that the Dogo figurines stopped being produced 2,400 years ago. When Japan moved into the next historical period, the Yayoi period, the Dogo figurines vanished. Roman artifact in Serbia. On Friday, July 10, 2020, an amazing rare Roman artifact was discovered. It happened during road construction near a landfill in Serbia. One of the road workers uncovered a mysterious stone slab engraved with Latin text. They informed the National Museum in Belgrade, and when a museum archaeologist arrived the next day, the Serbian Roman artifact had disappeared. Within just 24 hours of its discovery, it was stolen. According to the museum archaeologist, the artifact was probably part of a marble monument from the 2nd century AD. One side of the artifact had been engraved with a pair of feet wearing sandals, and on the other side were 15 lines of Latin text. The text, which was preserved thanks to pictures, recounted the life of a Roman military officer. This officer had apparently been behind various military attacks on the local Dacians, and had served in no less than 3 legions throughout his career. What you may not know is that Serbia was part of the Roman Empire for roughly 600 years. It wasn't until the Slavs arrived in the Balkans in the 6th century AD that the Romans lost their power over the region. And because of this, there are plenty of archaeological artifacts hidden throughout the small Eastern European nation. Well, something or someone must have spooked the gang. Amazingly, the rare stone has now been recovered. This was after an appeal across various media platforms by the National Museum of Belgrade, and apparently the object just showed up again. Ancient sword. A man with a metal detector discovered a rare sword from around the year 1700 BC. What makes this story so interesting is that he wasn't using his metal detector in some rural field or looking through the remains of some ancient battleground. He was in his parents' backyard. The discovery was made in the small village of Panela, which is in Finland. The artifact is a bronze sword at least 4,000 years old, but smashed to pieces. It was hiding just beneath the top layer of soil in the garden, and was his first big find using a metal detector. His name is Matti Rintama, and he purchased the tool just 2 weeks before finding the sword. According to the local Satakunta Museum, these kinds of discoveries are quite rare. Less than 200 objects from the Bronze Age have ever been found in Finland, and out of those 200 artifacts, only 25 were swords or daggers, and out of those 25, only 2 were found near Panela. The archaeologists with the museum say the sword was probably deposited in shallow water. Then, over many centuries, the water receded. The area turned into a marshland, then became a field, and then a residential neighborhood. The reason this sword was put in the water in the first place was likely an attempt to please the solar divinities of a sun cult. The sword is now in Helsinki, and officials have catalogued it in the archaeological collections of the Finnish National Museum. Fundraising efforts have been proposed to cover conservation costs, hoping to exhibit the sword in a regional museum. The Face of Christ. A surprising discovery was just made at St. Owen's Church of Ireland in the small Irish community of Ballymore. The church isn't that old, built as recently as 1827, but it's been decaying quite a bit, and so the locals pooled their resources and refurbished it. And that was when local historian CMS McDermott was brought in to help. As he was wandering around the site, he stumbled upon a rather strange building block, a piece of stone from the 13th century. CMS was shocked to see that the piece of stone had a carving on it that appeared to him to be the face of Christ. The thing about this church is that it was built over the site of an even older church, dating back roughly 800 years. But that much older church had collapsed, and so pieces of it were used to build a new one. That's why this 13th century stone had been used as a brick to help build the structure. But here's where things get strange. The stone, which is only about 12 inches by 8 inches, about the size of a sheet of paper, was seen by multiple other people at the site. But CMS was the first one who actually saw the face, which almost seems to have appeared overnight. Nobody knows how that could be possible, and so we have to assume that everyone else just missed it. The mystery now is that nobody knows who carved the face into the stone, or what its purpose was. We also don't know why such an obviously important carving of Jesus Christ would be jammed into an upper church window, where nobody would see it for almost 1,000 years. St. Owen's Church received a grant of about $100,000 from the Heritage Council to refurbish the tower of the church and keep it unspoiled for as long as possible. Researchers believe now that more surprises are hidden around the site. Native American artifacts. A team of archaeologists working along the Great PD River near Johnsonville just discovered a small collection of artifacts that once belonged to the Native Americans who had originally lived in this part of South Carolina. According to Chris Judge, the secretary of the Archaeological Society of the PD, this river was one of the interstates of the pre-colonial era. The Native Americans who lived here used the rivers and other waterways as their highways, going by boat from one settlement to another. It was how people got around quickly, and it's why there were so many settlements built beside rivers. The river system helped them operate an efficient trading network. It was Chris's team who discovered evidence of groups living beside the river over a long span of about 1,000 years. The oldest artifact dates back 2,500 years to the Mississippian era. This was when native communities blanketed much of the United States. This particular area was the very last stage of development that the Native Americans ever reached before the Europeans arrived. Chris says the people who lived here were at the edge of their society's frontier, and sadly for them, they were some of the first to be contacted by foreigners, who would massacre nearly all their people and steal their land. As for artifacts, the team found nothing too exceptional like statues or weapons, but instead they found the remains of houses and the everyday objects that would have been used by the natives. The project was funded by the Florence County Council on property belonging to Santee Cooper. The team is hopeful to one day soon exhibit the artifacts at the Florence County Museum. The stolen Nostradamus manuscript. A manuscript written by Nostradamus went missing 15 years ago. This text was written by the most famous French astrologer that ever lived, Michel de Nostradam. It was being kept safe in a library in Rome when somebody managed to steal the book. This manuscript is over 500 years old and contains what some believe to be prophecies about the future. It was only rediscovered when the ancient work was put up for sale at an auction house in Germany. This is one of the greatest and most mysterious books ever written. And yet listen to what happened after the artifact was pillaged from Rome in 2007. Investigators traced the book to flea markets in Paris, then the German city of Karlsruhe. That was where an art dealer somehow got a hold of it, then tried to sell the book off for a measly $12,000. What nobody seemed to realize as this manuscript was bouncing around flea markets was its authenticity. The book was written by Nostradamus himself, containing within its 500 pages prophecies about plagues, killer robots, and a world war erupting in 2023. Thankfully, this one-of-a-kind piece of history is now back in Rome and safely stored in the library where it belongs. Ceremonial golden gloves. The ceremonial golden gloves of Peru were discovered around the 1980s. Archaeologists aren't entirely sure what these strange golden hands were used for, but believe it had something to do with ceremonial activity. The artifacts almost look like infinity gauntlets, solid gold hands wrought by the Chimu culture on the northern coast of Peru. The Chimu culture prospered in Peru from between 900 to the year 1470. Their capital city was Chanchan, a place filled with beautiful artwork, captivating architecture, and a people with a rich history. Sadly, the Chimu went to war with the Inca and were utterly decimated. 50 years after the Inca obliterated the only other culture that may have been able to help them, the Spanish conquistadors arrived and wiped them out. These fantastic golden gloves were probably used in one of the mysterious religious ceremonies practiced by the Chimu. But unfortunately, it's difficult for researchers to determine exactly what kind of ceremony. Artifacts from Philip II of Macedon. Archaeologists in Bulgaria recently came across some extraordinarily rare artifacts. These items were uncovered during the excavation of a Thracian tomb in the country's north. They appear to have something to do with Philip II of Macedon, who was the father of Alexander the Great. The discovery was made near the small village of Zveshatari, which was once ruled by Thracian tribes. Archaeologists found animal motifs, an exquisite tiara, 100 golden buttons, and much more. But it's not so much about what they found as who the stuff had belonged to. History experts say these artifacts came from the tomb of Gath, ruler of Kotela, and father-in-law of Philip II of Macedon. Diana Gergova, head of the archaeological team, says these artifacts are extraordinarily rare and nothing similar has ever been found in Bulgaria. The Thracians were a powerful culture of warriors who were insanely rich in gold. They lived across Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and some of northern Greece starting about 6,000 years ago. While Greece and Rome were busy advancing themselves as civilizations, so too were the Thracians. The only difference was that the Thracians lived on the borders of these other places, so nobody really bothered them. It wasn't until the year 45 when the Roman Empire showed up and absorbed them, just swallowed them whole and nearly erased their culture. But before the Romans came along, the Thracians were insanely powerful. It looks like this tomb and all the artifacts in it belonged to Alexander the Great's grandfather-in-law. Just 2 generations later, Alexander would go on to conquer the world, or at least an enormous chunk of it. The first metal artifact. Tel Tassaf is a small village in the central Jordan Valley of Israel, with human habitation there dating back to about 5200 BC. This city was first discovered in the 1950s, but just recently a metal artifact was discovered here that dates back to the village's origins, 7,000 years ago. That makes the artifact the oldest piece of man-made metal ever found in the Middle East. What this suggests is that metal technology appeared first in Israel, centuries earlier than anywhere else in the world. The metal object wasn't the only thing archaeologists found. They identified architectural complexes, silos once used to hold about 30 tons of grain each, and cooking facilities. This was a major settlement in Israel and shows just how advanced these people truly were. Archaeologists even found painted pottery, thousands of beads made from ostrich eggshells, items from volcanic glass all the way from Armenia, and pottery imported from Mesopotamia. But it's really the metal awl which has everybody's attention. According to Professor Josef Garfinkel, the object is an elongated pin that was made from cast copper. It's pretty small, and we don't know what it was used for, yet it shows actual evidence of metallurgy practices over 3,000 years before the first known bronze items were made. The Mississippian stone statue. Tennessee has its very own official state artifact. It's one of the rarest Native American artifacts still intact after centuries. Artists made this stone statue sometime around the year 1250 during the Mississippian period. Only this was made by a group of people living in what is today Tennessee. The enormous statue, nearly 2 feet tall and depicting what appears to be an older man down on one knee, was discovered in 1939. A farmer was working in Wilson County when he came upon the statue completely by accident. What began as a farm actually ended up becoming the Sellers Farm Archaeological Site, one of the richest places in America for Native artifacts. We now know that this site was a major town for Mississippian culture. Archaeologists have identified a large platform and plaza surrounded by embankments, then small dwellings on the outskirts of that. This statue was probably a way for whoever crafted it to venerate someone's ancestors. Just like how we might have photographs of our grandparents hung up on the walls, the ancient people who lived along the Mississippi had stone statues of their loved ones erected around town or situated in their own homes. Bronze Age spear. A spear from the Bronze Age was discovered in a pretty strange place. The spear, which has been dated to about 3,500 years ago, was found inside the sewage works in the English region of Cirencester. It was found during construction work for new wetland habitat. The spear predates the invasion of the Romans by quite some time. The British Bronze Age lasted from about 2500 BC until 700 BC. Britain wasn't under Roman occupation until the year 43 AD. But let's look at the actual discovery. According to the project manager, Alex Thompson, when the digger pushed its scoop into the Bronze Age pit, the very first thing revealed was this beautiful spear. Nobody had expected that the work would reveal such great artifacts so quickly. As for how it got there, archaeologists believe this spear was a family heirloom placed inside the pit, which had likely been used for ritual burials. This whole area, about 10 acres of floodplain, had once been a vast settlement of prehistoric humans. The archaeologists took as much as they could, dug as much as they were able, and then had to give up. All 10 acres are being converted into a natural site, which will house amphibians, birds, and increase biodiversity by roughly 5%.
Medical cases of zombies. Zombies may be a whole lot closer to destroying humanity than most people realize. In 2014, research from the John Innes Centre in Norwich, UK, discovered a certain bacteria that was able to turn plants into zombies. This bacteria is known as phytoplasma, and it can affect ordinary plants like yellow flowers in a very peculiar way. The bacteria infects the plant and makes it grow extra leafy appendages instead of normal flowery blooms. These leaves then attract more insects than usual, who then become infected with the bacteria and spread it to other plants. The plant doesn't technically die, but it does become brain dead, or as brain dead as a plant can be. Its life cycle is severely disturbed, and its only purpose suddenly becomes to infect other plants. That's why scientists are calling this the zombie bacteria. It's unclear what kind of consequences a bacteria like this moving into human hosts could have. But this isn't the only case in nature of zombies being made through viruses. Researchers at the University of British Columbia made a shocking discovery in the Ecuadorian jungle of a wasp able to manipulate spiders through a zombie-like infection. The wasp lays an egg in the abdomen of the spider, and when that egg hatches and the larva emerges, it begins feeding on the spider from the inside. The larva takes total control over the spider's body and uses it like a puppet. It will force the spider to do its bidding, eventually eating the spider's brains and emerging as a fully grown wasp. The 2031 Comet. The world might just be coming to an end in 2031. In 2022, NASA reported the discovery of a huge comet barreling towards our planet at lightning speed. The comet is called Bernardinelli-Bernstein, and NASA says it's the biggest one in our solar system. It was first identified by scientists in 2014, and since then, they've been keeping a watchful eye on it. Scientists believe there is a very real chance that it could impact Earth. If that happens, it would be like the extinction of the dinosaurs all over again. What we know about the comet is that it takes roughly 3 million years to circle the sun, moving in a consistent elliptical orbit. As of right now, the comet is making its way through the Oort cloud toward Earth and the sun at a blistering speed. It's about twice the width of Rhode Island, and so it would cause utter devastation if it hit. Just like what happened to the dinosaurs, the comet would send dust and debris into the atmosphere. It would trigger earthquakes and volcanoes, and the world could be plunged into centuries of cold and darkness. All living organisms would most likely perish, except maybe rats, cockroaches, and crocodiles. All we can do right now is hold our breath and hope the comet passes us by without hitting our world like a nuclear missile from space. The cold core. A recent discovery by scientists is sending some into a frantic panic. Professor Motohiko Murakami and other experts from Carnegie Institution for Science discovered that the core of our planet is getting colder. That's a huge deal, and something that could end our existence. The thing about our planet is that 4.5 billion years ago, it was covered in a sea of magma. It took millions of years for that hot red magma to cool and form a crust. That crust is now what we live on, the hard surface beneath our very feet. But within that crust is the core, which is made partly of scorching liquid iron. Ever since the crust formed around the hot inner core of the Earth billions of years ago, the core has been slowly releasing heat. This slow release of heat is what drives tectonic events like earthquakes, and what's responsible for volcanoes. Volcanoes and earthquakes may be scary, but they are not nearly as scary as what happens if the core cools. Researchers use sophisticated measuring tools to look at the thermal conductivity of our planet and found it to be 1.5 times higher than what they expected. What this means is that the heat flow from the core into the mantle and then higher up into the crust is a lot stronger than what scientists previously thought. In other words, the Earth is cooling faster than anyone could have imagined. When the core cools down too much, the whole planet will become a barren wasteland, just like Mars. And when that happens, anything still alive on Earth will be toast. Toxic mold. Toxic slime molds have been oozing around on our planet for about 100 million years, and many of these slimy growths are wildly intelligent. A shocking new fossil recently revealed that a Cretaceous slime mold was not only intelligent, but it also looked exactly like the slime molds still around today. What this means is that long before the age of the dinosaurs, slime molds have been some of the smartest organisms on the planet. Also, they haven't changed much since. These brainless blobs are able to solve mazes. They can remember and adapt, and they look like nothing but piles of slimy mucus. So how could slimy mucus bring about the end of humanity? The answer is that it could one day overwhelm everything. Slime mold can be found all over the place, growing in people's gardens and stuck to the sides of trees. It's not much of a danger right now. It's not considered toxic, and it's not even a fungi. Slime mold is a type of amoeba, but they grow and spread very quickly and have the capability of becoming some of the largest organisms in the world. There are some who worry that one day, these weird slime molds will figure out how to grow and spread at an unprecedented rate, swallowing everything in nature and taking over the world. Have you ever seen weird slime like this anywhere? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. The Plague of WETA. New Zealand has a very peculiar bug that could be disastrous for humanity. There are 70 species of WETA in New Zealand. These strange little creatures are quite similar to long-horned grasshoppers and crickets, but they are not the same thing. The WETA is large, heavy, and covered in sharp spines. These jumbo-sized crickets are nocturnal, and they have powerful enough mandibles that one bite can cause significant pain for a human. They can even scratch with their legs, and those scratches are known to get infected. If that happens, a person could be in for some serious trouble. They aren't poisonous, but they are some of the peskiest insects found in New Zealand. There's one thing in particular that scientists discovered about the WETA, something you might be very interested in. The mountain stone WETA has special proteins that stop ice crystals from forming within its own cells. What this means is that the WETA can be frozen solid in a state of suspended animation. In sub-zero temperatures, the WETA goes into stasis. There's a possibility that other similar creatures have the same ability. We just don't know about it. One animal people are particularly fearful of are locusts. If it turns out the locust, which looks a lot like a WETA with wings, has the ability to freeze itself, that could spell disaster. Some fear there's a whole army of crop-ravaging insects still hidden under hundreds of feet of frozen ice, and that one day they will emerge and wreak havoc on humanity. Greenland Aliens. An unusually large, unidentified flying object has recently been spotted in Greenland. Conspiracy theorists believe the UFO crashed millions of years ago, and that one day soon, the aliens are going to come back for it. The discovery was made thanks to Google Maps. Curious and concerned alien enthusiasts were looking through satellite images when they noticed a buried object underneath Greenland's ice. The object clearly looks like some kind of ship. It's a weird triangular shape, and you can even see the cockpit at the front of the vessel. Unfortunately, the UFO was discovered embedded in what appeared to be an iceberg floating right beside Greenland. And for this reason, it's not like ordinary citizens with cameras can go out and investigate. The only organization with the resources to pull a UFO out of an iceberg near the tip of the world is the government. If the government does indeed secure themselves a frozen UFO, it's not like they're going to tell everyone about it. The truly terrifying part about the discovery, assuming it's real, is that the UFO had likely been frozen for millions of years. It must have crashed a very long time ago, then was buried in the ice. That means that our world could be in danger of more UFOs showing up in the future, potentially with sinister intentions. The God particle. In 2012, physicists discovered something called the Higgs boson, aka the God particle. It was considered such an impossible discovery that Stephen Hawking once made a bet of $100 that the God particle would never be found. When it was found, Stephen Hawking made a dire warning to humanity. He said the discovery of the God particle could be the undoing of the entire universe. It's the Higgs boson doomsday theory, and Stephen Hawking was not the only scientist who believed the discovery of the particle was a big mistake. Other scientists, such as theoretical physicist Joseph Licken with the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory in Illinois, agree. Joseph says it probably won't happen anytime soon, but it is a possibility. If you're not sure what the Higgs boson is, don't worry. It's kind of confusing. In simple terms, it's a particle that scientists say governs the very building blocks of matter itself. The particle is so important to the standard model of particle physics that researchers believe it has revealed something known as the Higgs field, an invisible field of energy all around us, and filling in all other particles with mass. One day, experiments involving the God particle could cause a quantum fluctuation to create a vacuum that will expand and gobble up the entire universe. Think of it like a black hole, starting out as the size of an atom, and then growing until it sucked in all matter in existence. Thawing plagues. The consequence of climate change isn't just longer and hotter summers, bigger hurricanes, and apocalyptic crop failures. It also means new plagues being released from the permafrost and spreading through the human population. Nowhere is the effect of climate change more dramatic than at the North Pole. In the Arctic polar region, things are really starting to heat up. Arctic sea ice is shrinking each summer. Greenland has become unstable, and all of this ice is melting into the ocean. As that happens, new and exciting things are found in the permafrost. By permafrost, I mean the layer of frozen soil that's been kept in a block of ice for tens of thousands of years. The permafrost still covers about 25% of the northern hemisphere, and it functions like an open-air refrigerator. Everything in the soil has been kept frozen solid, including things like mammoth bones and microbes that could kill us all. Unfortunately, it's already happening. In August of 2016, there was an outbreak of anthrax in Siberia. 72 people became sick, and one person was killed. When health officials began their investigation, they tracked the outbreak to the frozen corpse of a reindeer. It had been stuck in the permafrost, but then thawed, and the previously frozen anthrax was released on the local people. The Taupo Volcano. In September of 2022, scientists in New Zealand increased the alert level from 0 to 1 for their famous giant volcano. You know, the one responsible for one of the largest explosions of the past 5,000 years. It's called the Taupo Volcano, and it erupted 1,800 years ago in a truly spectacular fashion. It released dust, ash, and volcanic debris into the atmosphere with such force that the sun was obscured, and a huge part of New Zealand was obliterated. Scientists believed the world was plunged into darkness for some time. There was famine, pestilence, and violence broke out everywhere. If such an eruption were to occur today, humanity could be destroyed. There are already issues with food shortages, with humanity already standing on the brink of disaster. If this volcano explodes again and the sky turns black, we could find ourselves at the end. It's not a guaranteed thing that this will happen, but scientists did make a terrifying discovery before they changed the alert level. The geological agency GeoNet discovered 700 small earthquakes happening underneath the volcano in rapid succession. This usually signals volcanic activity, which is why New Zealand changed the alert level. There are still 5 more levels before the imminent eruption, but researchers say things can change rapidly at any time. The Doomsday Glacier. There is something horrifying happening at the polar opposite end of the world in Antarctica. The Doomsday Glacier, the one with enough ice to dramatically raise sea levels and cause global catastrophes, is hanging on by its fingernails. It's called the Thwaites Glacier, and scientists from the University of South Florida say it's on the verge of mass destruction. These scientists recently discovered that over the past 200 years, the base of the glacier has gradually dislodged from the seabed and retreated at roughly 1 mile each year. That's roughly twice the rate that scientists had anticipated, and in other words, the glacier is closer to its death than anyone could have imagined. Researchers say the glacier is at the end of its rope, and that we will see huge changes happening over small amounts of time in the near future. If the glacier totally collapses, sea level could be raised by about 16 feet. And while that may not mean the end of all humanity, over 1 billion lives could potentially be lost.
Queen Puabi's DNA. In 1922, British archaeologist Leonard Woolley discovered the tomb of Queen Puabi while excavating the Royal Cemetery of Ur. Coincidentally, it was the same year Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt. It's a big year for archaeology. Puabi is believed to be a queen who ruled the ancient Sumerian city of Ur in the First Dynasty, circa 2600 BC. Her position as queen was determined by the title Nin, found within her tomb. This meant she was either the woman ruler of Ur or the high priestess. Archaeologists assumed she was queen, and the discovery was even more sensational because she wasn't found connected to any king. Queen Puabi likely ruled the entire kingdom of Sumer by herself, something not many experts believed possible a century ago. The discovery of Queen Puabi changed how we view the ancient Sumerians. Her mere existence as a solo female ruler indicates a massive degree of cultural progression. But there is also a possibility that Queen Puabi was an alien. According to the late ancient astronaut theorist Zecharia Sitchin, the Nin title in Queen Puabi's grave did not mean queen. It was a term that translates to goddess. Zecharia was under the impression that if the queen's DNA was tested, it would show proof that she was not entirely human. The theory behind the Sumerian queen is that she was an ancient demigod, a half-breed of mixed human and Anunnaki heritage. She was placed on the throne by her alien creators to help oversee one of humanity's first civilizations. Zecharia Sitchin died in 2010. As far as we know, no one has ever done a detailed DNA investigation on the mysterious Sumerian queen. So what do you think? Do we need the Natural History Museum to share DNA test results for Queen Puabi, or should we just leave her alone? Mysterious prehistoric creature. Researchers were excavating a sheep field in the country of Wales when they came across a pair of extremely old fossils. These fossils are around 460 million years old. They date back to a time when Wales was covered by an ocean. The fossils, although they resemble an extinct marine creature called opabinids, may represent an entirely new species previously unknown to science. The exciting discovery was made by researchers Joseph Botting and Lucy Muir at the National Museum Wales during the COVID-19 lockdown. When the lockdown started, they began combing remote areas looking for fossils, seeing as they couldn't do much else. And that was when they found the bones of the mystery creatures in the sheep field. These fossils are extremely small. One is only about half an inch, while the other is only 0.1 inches.
These weren't exactly megalodons swimming through the ancient oceans. The largest of the fossils has been named bramble snouts. It had no eyes, a long and spiky snout, and kind of looked like an underwater alien. It likely used its snout to slurp up food in the sand at the bottom of the ocean. It also lived during the Cambrian explosion, a time when countless weird monstrosities began to evolve in the water, long before creatures started slithering onto dry land. Scientists have even speculated the bramble snouts could belong to a group of extremely ancient arthropods, meaning they would be related to modern crabs and millipedes. The MH370 mystery. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 departed from the Kuala Lumpur International Airport on March 8, 2014. It was supposed to arrive in Beijing several hours later, but it never did. 30 minutes after the plane took off, as it cruised over the South China Sea, the plane disappeared from the ATC radar. Military radar tracked it a little while longer as it deviated west and then disappeared. The plane has never been found, and its 227 passengers and 12 crew members are presumed dead. What really happened on March 8th is still an unsolved mystery. But the mystery just got a little weirder, with a piece of the aircraft being discovered in the possession of a Madagascan fisherman. The fisherman supposedly pulled the piece of debris off the beach in 2017 and took it home. He was then found with the debris in 2022, leading to renewed interest in the aviation disaster. The piece of wreckage found on the beach is called a trunnion door, and it's a fairly important component. According to Richard Godfrey, a British engineer, the piece shows significant damage. Richard says the fractures on its sides and mangled state show that the plane hit the water at extremely high speed. To cause such damage, the plane would have been in a speeding nosedive, and this would have shattered the aircraft into as many pieces as possible. Some believe this means the pilot crashed the plane on purpose, although it's still way too early to tell. Ancient Israeli bullet. A bullet from 2,200 years ago has just been discovered in Israel. How is this possible? Well, it's not the kind of bullet you're thinking of. It is a lead sling bullet, a projectile that would have been hurled at someone from a primitive, long-ranged weapon. It's like a rock and a rubber band, but much more powerful. The bullet was excavated in Yavne, found with two very interesting inscriptions on it. On one side of the bullet, someone carved the word Nike, which means victory. On the other side, someone carved the names of Heracles and Hronos, two Hellenistic gods. According to the Israel Antiquities Authority, the bullet is physical evidence of a huge battle between the ancient Greeks and the Hasmoneans. The bullet likely belonged to a Greek soldier and would have been aimed at one of the Jewish Hasmonean troops. Heracles and Hronos were the patron gods and guardians of the ancient city of Yavne, which was why they had been carved into the bullet. The battle itself came about because the Seleucid army of Greeks was trying to subjugate the Jews of Israel, and the Hasmoneans were making it difficult. The war that was waged here is so important it's part of the Jewish Hanukkah story. The story claims that the Greeks banned the Jewish Bible, forbade the sacrificing of pigs, and were then beaten out of Israel by the Hasmoneans for their cruelty. This bullet is physical proof that it all really happened. And now for number 6, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Kathy Sphere and Angelica Galdos for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries. Egyptian gold tongues. Archaeologists in Egypt have discovered the remains of mummies who were buried with gold tongues. This strange archaeological discovery was made in a cemetery near the city of Kuzna, about 35 miles from Cairo. According to Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, the mummies were buried in wooden coffins. They had grave goods like pieces of pottery and gold artifacts, and relics made in the shapes of flowers and scarab beetles. But the most fascinating part of the discovery were the golden tongues, which date back to about 2,000 years ago. The mummies were buried during the Greco-Roman period, which lasted between 332 BC and 395 AD. This particular piece of Egyptian history began with the fall of Egypt at the hands of Alexander the Great, and it ended with the Roman Empire splitting in half. During this time, mummies with gold tongues were exceptionally popular. Salima Ikram with the American University in Cairo says wealthy individuals would be buried with gold tongues, and sometimes even gold eyeballs. It was a way for the dead to transcend death itself and manifest into divine beings. Because the ancient Egyptians believed the flesh of their gods was made of pure gold, gold was the closest thing to godliness. Who is buried in Notre Dame? In 2019, the famous Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris went up in flames. The world watched the ancient cathedral burn, and once the fire was out, archaeologists were sent inside to survey the damage. The damage was significant, and the structure would require much restoration work. It was during restorations and excavations in 2022 that researchers came across a pair of unusual sarcophagi. The researchers were shocked to see the coffins hidden underneath Notre Dame contain decomposing corpses. They had no idea who the skeletons belonged to. After a bit of investigating, it looks like scientists have made some headway. Experts from the University of Toulouse III opened the coffins and studied the bones. They identified both skeletons as being male. Both of the men were very wealthy, and yet they appear to have lived very different lives. One of the dead men suffered from gout, the disease of kings. The other looks like he had a difficult life. The man with gout was identified as Antoine de la Porte, who died at the age of 83 on December 24, 1710. He was a clergyman, which was likely why he was buried underneath the cathedral. The other individual has no name, but lost most of his teeth in the months leading up to his death. It also looks like he died from chronic meningitis after contracting tuberculosis. Ancient severed hands. A team of archaeologists made a gruesome discovery in an ancient Egyptian palace. They uncovered approximately 16 severed hands buried in shallow pits. Each of the hands was a right hand, and they all date back about 3,600 years. The hands were found in the city of Avaris. According to Austrian archaeologist Manfred Beitak, the severed hands could be evidence of a macabre Egyptian custom. We know, based on ancient writings, that soldiers believed cutting off the right hand of their enemy would deplete their power for all eternity. Not only did they kill them, but they robbed them of having a good afterlife as well. The soldier then presented the severed hand to whoever was king at the time and may have been given a reward, either financially or superficially. Up until now, researchers didn't know if this was a real thing or not. But considering these severed hands were found near the throne room of an ancient palace, it looks like the Egyptians really may have kept severed hands as war trophies. Ancient DNA. Scientists have just discovered ancient DNA from 2 million years ago at the northern tip of Greenland. The area today is an Arctic desert, a vast and empty wasteland chilled by the frigid northern winds. But 2 million years ago, Greenland was a jungle. Mastodons roamed the land. There were towering trees and miles of rough vegetation. Greenland was truly a primeval paradise, extremely different to what it is now. Because animal fossils are difficult to find in Greenland, researchers chose to study the ancient landscape in a different way. They extracted environmental DNA called eDNA. They did this by taking soil samples, sifting through the genetic material, and identifying the genetic material shed by organisms and preserved in the soil. Everything from hair to spit, and even the slime of a decomposed carcass leaves traces behind in the dirt. The eDNA was able to give scientists a small snapshot of what Greenland looked like in its ancient past. They identified fragments of Arctic plants like birch trees and willow shrubs. They also found plants that thrive in warmer climates, like fir and cedar trees. The DNA also showed trace remains of geese, reindeer, lemmings, dung beetles, hares, and mighty mastodons. Love Dahlin, a researcher in evolutionary genomics at Stockholm University, said she would never have expected to find mastodons in northern Greenland. These behemoths have been found primarily in the temperate forests of North America, and yet they lived as far away as Greenland during prehistoric times. The origin of water. Researchers have been busy studying a rock that is 4.6 billion years old. It was around at the birth of our solar system. That makes it older than any fossil ever discovered, and yet you wouldn't think it was anything special just by looking at it. The ancient rock is a meteorite from outer space that fell from the heavens and landed on someone's driveway in the UK. It fell so randomly into civilization, it may have just solved the mystery of where our planet's water came from. The meteorite fell to Earth in February of 2021. When it was handed over to scientists, they performed many different tests to understand the composition of the space rock. The most shocking revelation was that the rock contains water with an almost identical chemical composition to the water we have on our planet. In other words, this meteorite and others like it could be the source for all our water. When the planet formed at the beginning of our solar system, it was a very large sphere of rock. It was so hot around our newly formed sun that all moisture evaporated instantaneously. It wasn't until Earth cooled down that water was given the chance to hang around. But there was no water because Earth was a barren wasteland. Scientists now believe water came only after the planet was attacked by a barrage of icy asteroids. Meteorites, just like the one found in the driveway, pelted our world like snowballs. The moisture they contained seeped out, and eventually the water accumulated into the oceans of the world. Singing dogs. A group of dogs believed to be some of the most ancient domestic canines on Earth were just rediscovered. The dogs are called New Guinea singing dogs, partly because they live in Papua New Guinea, and the other half because they sing. These dogs howl with a sound similar to that of a humpback whale. It's not only the singing that makes these dogs so strange and fascinating, but also their heritage. In 2018, researcher James McIntyre with the New Guinea Highland Wild Dog Foundation took some DNA samples from trapped wild dogs. Their DNA was linked directly to the ancestral line of singing dogs. They came from prehistoric relatives of dingoes and Asian dogs that humans brought with them to Oceania over 3,500 years ago. Throughout the centuries, the original breed became inbred. The singing dogs that were just found in the wild have had their unique bloodline watered down a lot. But even still, they haven't lost their singing voices. They are also more unique than many dogs in the world, with unusually flexible joints. These dogs can jump and climb like wildcats. Their howls are also so similar to the song of the humpback whale that researchers think there must be a connection, but they just don't know what it is.
Diamond from space. Scientists have identified something very, very rare on the surface of our planet. They confirmed the existence of a diamond from outer space, one that likely came from a meteorite. It was transported a significant distance across the cosmos, dislodged from a dwarf planet that existed 4.5 billion years ago. The stone is called lonsdaleite, and it's harder and stronger than a normal diamond. The natural chemical process by which this stone was formed is so incredibly advanced, scientists believe they could use it to manufacture industrial components. The story of the stone begins with geologist Andy Tompkins from Monash University in Australia. He was looking for meteorites in northwest Africa when he came across the diamond embedded in a space rock. After countless hours of investigation by numerous scientists, experts formed a theory. The lonsdaleite stone was part of the mantle of a dwarf planet that was struck by a gigantic asteroid. The asteroid caused an explosion so intense that it created the diamond and hurled it through the universe until it landed on Earth. If all of this is correct, it would make the diamond from outer space one of the rarest pieces of rock any human being has ever come across. The rock organism. Payura chilensis looks like a rock, but is in fact an organism. It's an extremely bizarre and rare creature considered a delicacy to some people in Chile and Peru. The living rock, as people call it, is a truly miraculous feat of nature. It contains high levels of vanadium in its blood, and it can reproduce with itself. Its blood also happens to be as red and vivid as the blood of humans. But the really shocking thing is that if you were to find a Payura chilensis while scuba diving, you would never even know it was a living thing.
It looks like any other piece of grayish-white rock on the bottom of the ocean. It isn't until you cut it open that you reveal its dark crimson blood and organic components. The living rock is related to sea squirts, and it kind of looks like a sea urchin. This thing has evolved to have no brain and no sensory organs, and it feeds by filtering nutrients through its body. It doesn't feel anything, it doesn't think about anything, and acts more like a plant than an animal. It was once found everywhere in the intertidal zones of Chile and Peru, but people have eaten so many of them that they are starting to become rare. One of the weirdest things about the living rock is the toxic vanadium in its blood. Its blood contains concentrations of the heavy metal, millions of times greater than the seawater it lives in. Scientists don't know why the metal is in the creature's blood, or what the purpose of the metal even is. Massive arthropods. 470 million years ago, there were gigantic arthropods living in the world's oceans. The arthropods were upwards of 7 feet long, according to preserved fossils recently uncovered in Morocco. These early animals were positively massive in comparison to the arthropods that still live on our planet today, such as shrimps and spiders. Most insects are descendants of the early invertebrates, only they've gotten a lot smaller over the past almost 500 million years. The extraordinarily rare fossils of the giant arthropods were found while exploring the Fezuata Shale. This is currently a vast and desolate wasteland in the Moroccan desert, but was once the sea millions of years ago. Nearly half the fossils discovered in this area have been jumbo arthropods. It's clear to scientists that the arthropods dominated the world, or at least this part of the world, long before the days of the dinosaurs. Researchers were able to identify an estimated 70 species from the fossil beds during their dig. Even with all the discoveries of huge arthropods, scientists say they've only scratched the surface. They've only found so many of these extinct jumbo creatures here because there must have been an underwater landslide that preserved their shells. But it's only a snapshot of what was once a chaotic and bursting ecosystem of strange underwater creatures. It's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Jean Art and Dave Stewart for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about rare discoveries. The rarest thing in the universe. Scientists believe they have just detected the rarest thing ever, something 1 trillion times older than the universe itself. Ethan Brown from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute says he and his team detected a process which takes over 1 trillion times longer than the age of the universe to unfold. It's the longest and slowest process that has ever been directly observed. This process of decay was only observed thanks to special dark matter detection equipment. But just what in the world am I talking about? According to researchers with the Xenon Collaboration Team, Ethan and his colleagues observed the radioactive decay of Xenon-124 using instruments built to detect dark matter particles. Xenon-124 has a half-life of 18 sextillion years, an unimaginable amount of time. The radioactive decay was detected thanks to a vat of super pure liquid xenon called Xenon-1T, shielded from cosmic rays 4,500 feet beneath Italy's Gran Sasso Mountains. Researchers had not been looking for radioactive decay. They were using their instruments to search for dark matter. But because their instruments are so sensitive, and because they are searching for dark matter particles inside a vat of pure xenon, it was always a possibility. It's just nobody thought it would happen. They coincidentally managed to pick up signals from an interaction between a dark matter particle and the nucleus of a xenon atom, which triggered the longest known process in the universe, the decay of a Xenon-124 atom, the rarest turtle in the world. The rarest turtle on the planet recently hatched its eggs in Texas. It was the first time such an event occurred, that we know about. It happened on Magnolia Beach in the summer of 2022. R.J. Shelley has been working at the beach for 31 years and has never in his life seen a sea turtle nest hatch. Yet in 2022, the rarest turtle in the world decided to lay its eggs in the sand of the beach, and luckily Shelley was around to help. He spent most of his day assisting the hatchlings. He helped them reach the water instead of wandering onto the road and being run over. About 40 or 50 hatchlings made it from the nest into the sea, something huge for the critically endangered species. This is the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle, the smallest sea turtle in the world. They only grow to be about 2 feet long and around 70 pounds, and there is no other sea turtle more endangered. The fact that these things are now laying their eggs in Texas is a great step in their own conservation. And because sea turtles typically return to the same beach where they were born to lay their own eggs, they could come back in 15 years to create even more. Rare neutron star. Scientists have just spotted one of the rarest objects in outer space. The object in question is a very unique neutron star produced by 2 white dwarf stars smashing into one another. It may sound like something that happens all the time out in space, but this event may have created one of the rarest stars ever seen. A white dwarf star is formed when a neutron star runs out of mass. Just about every star in the universe starts out as a neutron star. When these stars use up their energy, they turn into a white dwarf. Then, at some point, the mass is too much, and the pressure within the core cannot resist its own gravity. This causes an implosion. The white dwarf star implodes on itself, either becoming a neutron star or a black hole. At least that's what scientists have always thought, but when researchers discovered the stellar object J005311, they found something very suspicious. The bright star is nestled inside of a gas cloud and happens to be 40,000 times brighter than the sun, except it gives off no visible light. That's because its light is infrared only. It's also spinning about 8 times faster than the velocity of most stars, almost 10,000 miles per second. Scientists believe the 2 white dwarfs collided, creating enough heat to cancel out the collapse and supernova that would have resulted with both of them. It's an incredibly rare event, and the only one scientists have ever witnessed themselves. The star is basically a perpetual explosion of swirling heat that could last for thousands of years. Pink iguana babies. For the first time ever, scientists have discovered hatchlings of one of the rarest animal species we have on our planet. Researchers in the Galapagos Islands were blown away to find the nesting site of Galapagos pink land iguanas. This is a big deal considering the species was only described about a decade ago in 2009. Since then, conservationists have been convinced the Galapagos pink land iguana was already knocking on extinction's door. Up until this new discovery, scientists have only witnessed adult pink iguanas about 4 feet long. They have never found a living baby, never a nest, and never an egg. They always assumed that when the fascinatingly rare pink iguanas were found, they were already in the process of going extinct. It looked like the last mature adults were the final members of their species. But now everything has changed. Paul Salaman from the Galapagos Conservancy says underground nests have been found, indicating the species may still be saved from extinction. There now appears to be an estimated 300 pink iguanas left, making them one of the rarest reptiles still alive. They live in a remote area, less than 10 square miles on Wolf Volcano. But things are still looking grim. Conservation monitors have already seen feral cats attacking and eating hatchlings as they try to crawl out of their nests. Specialists are now trying desperately to preserve the few remaining hatchlings before the pink iguana really does go extinct. Red spiral galaxies. The James Webb Space Telescope, the most powerful telescope ever created by human hands, has made some fantastic discoveries since it was launched in 2021. One of the rarest things that it spotted are red spiral galaxies. Some of these might just be the most distant ever seen by us. But red spiral galaxies themselves are nothing new. NASA has imaged them in the past, just not in great detail. But with the James Webb Telescope, we can see the physical morphology of these spiral galaxies, which could help scientists to understand the early universe. Spiral galaxies are common. Red spiral galaxies are rare, making up an estimated 2% of galaxies in our local universe. Scientists don't know the secrets of these galaxies, but assume they were more common during the earlier days of the universe. 2 particular red spiral galaxies appear to be the oldest. RS-13 and RS-14 were created between roughly 10 billion years ago. These are currently the most distant and earliest of all the spiral galaxies. Even more bizarre is that RS-14 is a passive galaxy, one that has stopped forming stars. Researchers say this could mean that at the beginning of the universe, there were a lot more galaxies that didn't even have any stars in them. The ancient eagle. An incredible discovery has been made in the desert of southern Australia. 63 bone fossils were found belonging to one of the best preserved ancient eagles ever. Paleontologists from Flinders University are calling it a very rare discovery. The bones add to the long and complicated evolutionary history of flying raptors in Australia. This ancient eagle lived 25 million years ago and was the largest bird of its kind in Australia at the time. Its fossil was found at a remote outback cattle station, and researchers were shocked to see that it is a brand new species. Researchers have named the creature Archaehyrax sylvestris. They say it's one of the oldest eagle-like raptors that ever lived. But the eagle wasn't the biggest bird that ever took to the skies. It's even slightly smaller than the wedge-tailed eagle still around today. However, because the largest marsupial predators 25 million years ago were only about the size of a small cat, the eagle was perfectly suited to its environment. It would have been able to prey on all terrestrial animals, making it the apex predator of Australia's prehistoric skies. Professor Trevor Worthy explained that because eagles were at the top of the food chain, they left very few fossils behind. There just weren't that many of them to leave a large fossil record. It's rare enough to find a single ancient eagle bone, never mind 63 of them, creating the entire skeleton. The most distant star. The Hubble telescope has discovered what astronomers suspect could be the farthest and most primordial star ever observed through a lens. Jane Rigby with NASA says the newly discovered star is by far the most distant individual star ever seen. It's called Arundel, and it was likely created about 900 million years after the Big Bang. If true, this star existed during a time when the earliest galaxies were growing and evolving, in a time when the universe was still largely dark. Prior to this new and very rare discovery, the oldest star was nicknamed Icarus and was about 3.2 billion years younger than Arundel. Scientists estimate the star is about 50 times bigger than the Sun, but that's about all we know. It's so far away that scientists can't even confirm 100% that it is a star. It could be a different cosmic object. It's so far that we are looking at it through our telescope as it appeared billions of years ago. The light from the star would have spent the last several billion years traveling across the universe to reach NASA's telescope. This means the star is long gone, probably already sucked into a black hole. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back soon for more awesome stuff from the channel. See you later. Bye!